Hello, I'm Alison Wallace and I'm a consultant clinical psychologist working in the Hampshire Isle of Wight Regional Forensic CAMHS team. I'm going to talk today about sexually inappropriate behaviour in children and provide some information to help you understand and to assess that. So a definition that we use is one or more children engaging in sexual discussions or acts that are inappropriate for both their age or stage of development. These can range from using sexually explicit words and phrases to full penetrative sex with other children or with adults, and this is a definition provided by the NSPCC. It could be helpful to understand sexual development and sexual behaviour along a continuum and within a developmental framework. I'm going to introduce Hackett's continuum and then move on to talk about commonly seen and less commonly seen behaviours along the continuum by age range. The diagram depicts Hackett's continuum, and this can provide a broad framework to understand if a behaviour is healthy and or common, or is inappropriate and becoming problematic or abusive. So the continuum ranges from normal behaviour, so that which is developmentally expected, which is within social norms, and which is within the context of shared decision making between the two young people. Inappropriate behaviour, becoming more concerning, is a single instance of inappropriate behaviour. It's socially acceptable within a peer group, but the context may well be inappropriate. It's genuinely consensual or reciprocated. Problematic behaviour would be considered as something which is developmentally unusual or socially unexpected. It often lacks consent and may include some compulsivity, so the children feel compelled to do it. So further down the continuum is abusive behaviour. This often has a victim, and there is a misuse or mismatch of power. There's often coercion and force for the victim. Behaviour is not socially acceptable, and it may include some expressive violence. At the end of the continuum is violent behaviour, and here is where we would see physically violent sexual abuse, highly intrusive sexual abuse, and behaviour which may be arousing through the violence for the perpetrator. Broad examples of uncommon or unexpected sexual behaviour by age range can include, for 5 to 9-year-olds, it's uncommon to have adult-like sexual interactions, talk about specific sexual acts, or self-stimulate in public. For 9 to 13-year-olds, it's uncommon to display sexual behaviour in a public place or regularly display adult-like sexual behaviour, such as oral sex. For 13 to 18-year-olds, it is uncommon to masturbate in public or display sexual attraction towards much younger children. Along with common or uncommon behaviours, the context of the behaviour can also help to understand if a behaviour is presenting as inappropriate, problematic, or harmful. The following slide provides some relevant context to consider. The age of any other children or young people involved. Are they significantly older or significantly younger? Is the behaviour unusual for that particular child or young person? Has there been a change or an escalation in behaviours? Have all the children or young people involved freely given consent? Is there evidence of coercion or bullying? Are the other young children distressed? And is the child distressed by their own behaviour or distressed by being found out about it? Really significantly, is there an imbalance of power? Is the behaviour excessive or threatening? Is the behaviour occurring in a public or private space? With the continuum in mind, I'm going to talk through sexual behaviour in children and what you may see or hear about. I will break this down by age group. First of all, under 5, then 5 to 11, and then 12 and up. Within each of these age groups, I will refer to a new tool called the Brook Traffic Light Tool. This is a tool that's frequently used and can help professionals to think about behaviours in relation to levels of risk or concern. Using this tool, there are 3 broad categories of behaviour. Those which are considered to be green behaviours, which are generally those frequently seen within the age group and most often occur between children of the same age and where there's less likely to be a power difference. These are not behaviours that you would want to continue, but are not unexpected within the age range and can often be redirected or stopped through talking to the child, explaining what is appropriate and why, and educating around sexual behaviour and relationships. AMBER behaviours are those that are not appropriate and are often referred to as problematic by professionals. These behaviours can become unsafe and unhealthy and will require intervention by an adult and often closer monitoring of the child. Those considered to be red behaviours are those classed as harmful or abusive. These behaviours are unhealthy and harmful and will require assessment and associated interventions from professionals working in the field. Although red types of behaviours would require an immediate safeguarding response, green and amber behaviours may also require such a response, depending on the nature and persistence of the behaviour. It is always advised to seek advice and refer to your local safeguarding policies. Children under 5. Green behaviours are often seen in this age range. Children often show curiosity about each other's and their own bodies at this age, and they explore and understand the world. These behaviours might include attempting to touch or curiosity about other children's genitals, attempting to touch or curiosity about breasts, bottoms or genitals of adults, role-play games such as Mummies and Daddies and Doctors and Nurses, interest in body parts and what they do. They may well touch their own genitals when they're having their nappy changed or when going to sleep, when tense, excited or afraid. They will start to be interested in the differences between males and females, boys and girls. They may well ask about genitals, about breasts and about babies. Children of this age often like to be naked. They're often interested in watching people go to the bathroom and in talking about wee and poo. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, but gives examples of the most common behaviours associated with bodies and how children under 5 start to understand them. Amber behaviours, so inappropriate or problematic behaviours in the under 5s. These behaviours can be similar to those in the green section, but they often persist even after adult intervention. Some of these behaviours also now include unwanted behaviours towards others, and so begin to become non-consensual. Behaviours can continue to touch or rub genitals in the public after being told many times not to do so. Continuous questions about genital differences after all relevant questions have been answered. Touching or trying to touch the genitals, breasts of adults not in the family and asked not to be touched. If they put something into their own genitals or rectum or try to do that to another child and this continues after being told very clearly no. Rubbing up against other children with clothes on or off, and pulling other children's pants or skirts up or down against their will. Red behaviours considered to be harmful in the under 5s. These behaviours are starting to become much less common and can include more obvious coercion or control of other children. So if they touch or rub themselves in public or in private to the exclusion of normal childhood behaviours. They play male or female roles in an angry, sad or aggressive manner. It should be remembered that this in and of itself may not indicate harmful behaviours, but would be noted if it's in the context of other sexually problematic behaviours. They try to touch adults' private parts, particularly if this seems secretive. Uses coercion or force in role-play games with other children, and if they persist in putting something in their own or other children's genital or rectum, particularly if this is painful. If they simulate intercourse without clothes or engage in any type of oral sex, doing any of the above in secret. So what to consider? If a child is displaying green types of behaviour, then some appropriate education about the body, public and private parts can help. There should be clear boundaries about what can and cannot continue. So if a child is displaying amber behaviours, again, appropriate boundaries about what is or isn't acceptable in situ or as close to the time as is appropriate and where appropriate. Distract the child with an alternative activity. Be alert to similar or ongoing behaviours and seek advice. If a child is displaying behaviours in the red category, the behaviour should be stopped and the child monitored and safeguard measures put in place. Advice should always be taken. Risks will be assessed and mitigations to risk put in place. Any actions taken to reduce a child or young person's freedom will be regularly reviewed, as a child accessing ongoing developmentally appropriate activities with friends and family provides a protective environment and contributes to a change in these behaviours. The removal of restrictions will, however, need to be balanced very clearly with safeguarding them, other children, and at times adults around them. For 5 to 11-year-olds, the exploration of their own bodies and an interest in others continues during this phase of development, and children often become more interested in where babies come from and in the difference in appearance of male and female genitals. They're also becoming more aware of private and public areas of their own and others' bodies, as well as private and public environments. There'll be a range of behaviours that fall into exploration and interest rather than sexually problematic. There may be more inappropriate behaviours as children learn what is and isn't socially acceptable. Guidance, clear boundaries and education will be important in the case of inappropriate behaviours. Concerns would increase if these behaviours become persistent. If you have concerns, of course, then seek advice. So green behaviours within this age range, those commonly seen. There will be an increased sense of privacy about their own body. Children may now ask to go to the toilet by themselves, and in the later stage of the age range, want to wash and dress by themselves. Nudity in public for the earlier age, around 5 to 6. It's more likely for masturbation, and this is typically with an awareness of a need for privacy. There's increased curiosity, particularly about other children's genitals, and this can include looking at and or touching the bodies of familiar children. Often as comparison, non-consensual or non-familiar children would be of more concern. There may be more questions about where babies come from, physical differences between male and female body types, and relationships. There's often an increased interest in toilet humour and in sharing the names of genitals. These behaviours will be in the context of other areas of interest and development. They should not be at the expense of those. Amber behaviours, so those that are becoming problematic in this age range. Masturbation in preference to other activities. Masturbation in public or with peers. And masturbation that causes self-injury. Explicit talk, art or play of a sexual nature. Persistent questions about sex despite them being answered, showing a preoccupation or distinct preference for these types of conversations. Persistent nudity and or exposing private parts in the presence of others. Persistently watching or following others to look at them or touch them. Pulling other children's pants down or skirts up against their will. Persistently mimicking sexual flirtation, which is much too advanced for their age, with other children or with adults. Touching the genitals of animals. Covert or secret use of a mobile phone and internet with known or unknown people, which may include giving out identifying information. Some of these behaviours will be seen in isolation and some together. An increased persistence, secrecy and lack of consent for behaviours from others can all give rise to increased concern. Again, seek advice if you are concerned. Red or harmful behaviours. These behaviours are not typically seen and advice should be sought and safeguarding concerns raised. If there is a compulsive masturbation to the exclusion of all other activities. There's masturbation that causes harm and the masturbation continues despite that. If children want to masturbate in front of others. If there's persistent bullying involving sexual aggression. If there's simulation of or participation in sexual activities, including sexual behaviour with younger or less able children, is there a power differential? Coercing other children into sexual behaviours. Accessing the rooms of sleeping children to touch or engage in sexual activity, and any sexual activity with animals. Again, the use of mobile phones and internet for sending or receiving sexual images. Responding to sexual behaviour in children aged 5 to 11. So those behaviours within the green areas. Describe the unwanted behaviour clearly Explain that there's a time and a place for touching private parts of the body, and again, look for the right opportunity to educate about socially acceptable behaviours. Those in the amber category: describe the unwanted behaviour, remind the child or children of what is or isn't appropriate, be very clear in your explanation. Set clear expectations that the behaviour is not acceptable, not wanted, and should not be repeated. Look for the right time to educate about what is socially acceptable and why. Where appropriate, introduce the idea of consent. It can then be useful to engage the child in another activity to show them that they are not in trouble, that the behaviour should not become secretive, but that it should stop. Red behaviours. Look to safeguard the child and other children. Be clear that the behaviour is not acceptable and it must stop. Prohibit the behaviour and seek advice. It's also really important at this time to spend time with the child doing other activities that are acceptable. The message to the child should be that it is the behaviour that's unwanted, not them. It's important that the child does not feel rejected wherever possible, as this will support relationships with an adult. A protective factor for both recidivism and intervention. Relationship is a core condition of change, and it is as important as any intervention content. Adolescents. Adolescents often get their sexual relationship and education from each other and online. They may be sourcing unhelpful and unrepresentative websites and expecting that sexual relationships will mirror those experiences, those they see from films and the internet, and increasingly from pornography. It is typical in adolescence to begin to rely less on your parents, more on your peers, and to become more secretive. This is also the case with sexual behaviours. There's increased research to suggest that girls will experience sexual bullying and assault to some nature or degree significantly more often than boys. This may be interpreted as something which is standard rather than problematic or harmful. It may be important to be clear that just because a behaviour is common, it does not make it appropriate. Young people who have a disability or are part of the LGBTQ+ population are also overrepresented. The perpetrators have tended to be overrepresented by men and boys, but it's important to remember that this is not always the case. Sexual behaviour will vary significantly within this age range, but healthy sexual behaviours tend to be associated with the following: being between young people of a similar age and developmental stage, voluntary and consensual, without a secondary gain, should be balanced with other interests, hobbies and experiences, and it should be expected for their age range. Those behaviours which would be considered green for adolescents: occasionally making light-hearted sexual jokes with friends of a similar age, flirting or sending sexual messages to someone the same age, obviously if they both consent, asking questions about sex and about relationships, looking at online information about sex and relationships, and this can include pornography, masturbating at home when alone and in a private space, showing affection and experiencing physical intimacy such as hugging, kissing and holding hands, sexual activity including sexual touch and penetrative sex among older consenting teenagers. It's also standard not to be having any sexual feelings and or choosing not to experiment sexually. Pornography and the role it can play in adolescent sexual development will not be fully discussed here, but it is worth holding in mind the potential for the normalising of some of the features of pornography by young people, and how this might be unhelpfully translated into young people's ideas about what is healthy within sexual relationships and relationships more generally. Amber behaviours in this age range. These can be concerning and might be harmful for a teenager. There may be a sign your child needs extra guidance and support from adults around them, particularly if issues continue over time. Examples of amber behaviours can include choosing to spend time viewing sexual pictures and videos over other interests and hobbies that people you previously enjoyed, sending pornography to others, using overly sexualised language and generally in more than one setting, exploring extreme sexual fetishes involving physical harm or illegal behaviours, seeking sexual advice from untrustworthy sources such as pornography or unmoderated forums, a willingness to engage in sexual activity with someone of a similar age during very early adolescence, the sharing of sexual pictures or videos of themselves with someone of a similar age. This might be common, but it can be risky, and it is illegal to possess or make or share a sexual picture or video of someone under 18 years of age. Red behaviours in adolescence. Red behaviours are unsafe and might involve abuse or exploitation and could lead to prosecution. They are likely to be harmful in some way to both the child and the victim of the child. These behaviours will require immediate intervention for the safeguarding of children and of adults. Examples of the red behaviours include taking or sharing sexual pictures without somebody's consent, having sexual conversations or sharing sexual images with children much younger than themselves, or with those that are considered to be particularly vulnerable, pressuring other young children to do sexual things online or offline using threats, force, constant hassling or coercion. This can include rewards. Having sexual interactions with strangers. That can include adults or young people, online or offline. Looking at illegal sexual material, for example, involving animals, children or extreme violence. Having sexual contact with an animal. Exposing their genitals in public, or sending unsolicited pictures of their genitals to others. Having sex where either person is under 13 or there is a significant age gap or other vulnerabilities affecting the ability to consent, even if they think it is consensual. Sexual contact between siblings or other children within the family. Most adolescents involved in red category behaviours who get the right support will not go on to commit sexual offences as an adult. Always seek advice. So just to recap, remember that the relationship is a core condition of change, and it is as important as any intervention content. Try to engage the child or young person wherever possible. Remember, this is one aspect of their behaviour. There may be associated shame that can trigger both low mood or anxiety, and they may disengage from us. Supporting the child or young person to get help and feel confident that adults around them will support them is crucial to a good outcome. The Hackett Continuum remains a good reference for helping to put sexual behaviours into a context. So you can find more information and areas of support on the Hampshire CAMHS website. You'll also find more videos like this offering advice and information.